Well, friends, on today's episode of Sitting in the Car in the Dark, which is stupid because I was home and could have done this earlier in the day and I just didn't. That's me, I guess. Anyway, tonight was a small group night and we're starting on this new experiment that Pastor Aaron was encouraging us to do, which is to go through a book of the Bible and just talk about it, like chapter by chapter, whatever. And so we started doing that, and I'm really glad that we are. We're going through Mark because that was the book that Aaron was like, hey, go through a gospel. Talk about who Jesus is based on what you read there. Also, Mark is the shortest book of like the four gospels, so maybe start there if that's easier. And that's what we're doing. I haven't really read that book of the Bible very much. Like, out of all the New Testament, I feel like Mark is one of the ones I've read a lot less. Probably because it's preached on less, so it's been less on my radar. But we were talking about there's a passage in like the first couple of chapters that is the Pharisees being upset with Jesus for doing good deeds, basically, because they were angry that they couldn't catch him in healing someone on the Sabbath. And so he calls them out and is like, hey, like, are you wanting me to do evil, or are you wanting me to do good deeds? And they don't say anything because they're mad. But what stuck out to me there is, so within our small group, we have a range of different opinions and beliefs in terms of what our purpose as followers of Jesus looks like on a day-to-day basis. There are some of us who are more social justice minded, and then there are some of us who are not as justice minded. And what's really interesting to me is that by jumping into a passage like that and then even briefly acknowledging Jesus calling people out for being upset with him for doing a good thing because of how it was done or when it was done, there is no way that I personally can not see that as Jesus being someone who was not only justice minded, but restorative justice minded. And restorative justice is something that Pastor Aaron's been talking about a lot lately. And I know it's making some people uncomfortable because the term social justice makes a lot of people uncomfortable, especially within Christian circles. Which is hard for me. Like, I get it because I used to be that way. Like, that used to be the way I think. But once I started viewing social justice as Aaron describes it, restorative justice, like seeking the most healing and complete way of fixing things for people who are suffering, helping them not only get on their feet, but thrive after they get on their feet. Like, after seeing Jesus that way, after seeing social justice in that light, it's impossible for me to ignore how often Jesus does that in the Gospels. And I get it, like, it's kind of like having the blinders on, and when you take the blinders off, you start to look from side to side and realize that there's so much more than what you've been looking at previously when you were staring straight ahead. So in this case, if you're staring straight ahead at the things that Jesus did, you can just call them miracles and be like, yeah, like that was one of the reasons why Jesus was walking around healing people, because they were miracles that he could perform that showed his power and glory. And that's like when you have the blinders on. When you take the blinders off, you're like, oh, no, actually, Jesus was just super compassionate and moved by the needs of the people around him, and saw that because of who he was and is, not just as a person but as God, there's no way he could ignore the pain and suffering and needs of the people around him. And by doing so, it also displayed the power and glory of God. But there's a selfishness that I think a lot of times Christians justify in terms of describing, like, God's main goal is to display his glory. And then we stop there. We don't talk about, like, the methods by which God is displaying his glory, and maybe the motivation behind that display is not just the display, and it's also about the deep love and compassion and mercy that comes along with that display of glory. Maybe I'm talking out of my butt, I don't know, but I can't ignore it now that I've thought about it, so I guess other people get to think about it too. Take what you will from it. I don't know. I'm gonna burp any second now. So I'm gonna wow. Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna stop before I say anything else stupid.